We are very excited to welcome today's luncheon speaker, Senator Todd Young. Representing Hoosiers in the United States Senate, Senator Young currently serves as on the Senate Committees on Finance, Foreign Relations, Commerce, Science and Transportation, and Small Business and Entrepreneurship. A fifth-generation Hoosier, Young was taught the value of perseverance growing up watching his parents work hard to support the family. These lessons were instilled young as his first jobs were delivering newspapers, mowing lawns, and providing janitorial services at the family business. After graduating with honors from the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Senator Young accepted a commission in the U.S. Marine Corps. While serving in the Marines, Senator Young worked as a business consultant. He has served Indiana in the U.S. Congress since 2010, where he served 3 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. He has been representing us in the U.S. Senate since 2016. Please join me in welcoming Senator Todd Young to the stage.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, fellow Hoosiers, for inviting me to address all of you today. I want to leave enough time to take some of your questions. I know that's part of the program here in today's agenda. And this is the first time I've delivered remarks on this topic, but let me sort of start this way. Marines have a signature communication style. First, we tell them what you're going to tell them. Then we tell them. Then we tell them what you told them. So in that spirit, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. First thing you should know is this speech may be a little bit different in that most elected officials will stand before you and tell you what's wrong and how they're going to fix it. That's not going to be my approach today. I'm going to tell you what's wrong, and then I'll talk about how we can work together to fix it. And we can fix it with 5 M's. That's where I'm going to end up. Mentoring, mixing, media, mending, and mobilization. So we'll come back to those. Today's also going to be different in another regard. I'm not going to be focused on a lot of numbers today. GDP, employment figures, the size and distribution of wealth. These are really important things and metrics that we need to be attentive to. But in terms of the economy, our greatest strength, I think all of you will agree, can't be quantified by a number or a statistic. The value of a nation is in its people. And economic and government policies have tremendous civic consequences. Throughout American history, our economic policy, our government policies were designed to produce a certain type of citizen, men and women who were built for self-government. So that's what I'll be discussing today. Now, I don't believe that a focus on building men and women for self-government is our leading objective today. I think we've lost sight of it. And it's one of my greatest concerns, not only as an elected official, but just as an American citizen. We focus so much on our nation's material welfare, and that indeed is very, very important. But we do so oftentimes while neglecting what we used to call political economy, our civic health. And this is what I will elaborate on. Emma Lazarus wrote a famous sonnet. It's called the New Colossus. It sits at the base of the Goddess of Liberty in New York Harbor. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is her imprisoned lightning. Now, I read this recently and really captured my imagination. What did Emma Lazarus mean by imprisoned lightning? I suspect I'm taking a little bit of creative license with her work, but to me, it wasn't merely a reference to the 9 electric lamps in her torch, which was cutting-edge technology of the day. To me, imprisoned lightning is that God-given potential in every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth. It's the reason those seeking a better, freer life have come to our shores for generation after generation. It's the electric spark of human potential that fuels our common destiny. It fires our individual and collective happiness. It's our nation-defining promise at the heart of the Declaration of Independence. It was our founders who lit this fire. They were inspired by the Enlightenment. They knew that in this short life, humans aren't placed on this earth merely to mark time or to watch the grains of sand slip through the hourglass. No, we're put here to achieve, to strive, to reach our full potential as individuals and collectively. And the framers of our Constitution had faith that history could actually be beaten by reflection. So they built institutions to enable people to unleash their lightning, to become the best version of themselves. This is the genius of our constitutional order. In fact, no nation on earth was ever so carefully created to ensure that people could realize their full human potential. No nation on earth was ever created with such an intentionality to making sure that people had a fair shot at earning their own success. A fair shot. It's not a utopian scheme that relieves people of the rigors of life. Indeed, a nation overflowing with unearned advantage or inherited disadvantage is not a nation built for self-government. But what our founders put forward and their progeny have sustained is a political economy that reinforces our Republican form of government. It's a framework of self-government animated by the idea that with effort, any citizen could earn a living, raise a family, leave their mark on their society, and play a meaningful part in the life of their community and of their nation. It's a dignified life. Here in America, we're a land where citizens need not be supervised, but set free to lead lives of their own choosing and unite in times of peril to address common challenges. In America, these things should always be beyond negotiation. What Abraham Lincoln called the race of life, and the preservation of what he also described as the sacred right of self-government. These are what have made America so unique in the history of mankind. One of the blessings of my job is the opportunity to travel the highways and byways of this state and meet all kinds of people. I mean, it's a lot of fun, but it's incredibly rewarding. It's an enriching experience. I get to befriend people. I get to hear about their challenges and opportunities and their dreams, and occasionally learn how I can help, oftentimes by getting out of the way, occasionally by acting. They hail from all manner of different backgrounds, and they harbor very different political opinions from one another, too. But to a person, there's commonality and aspiration. They want to be valued. They want to give back. They want to be self-reliant and play a meaningful part in the life of their communities. But realizing these dreams, seeing their lightning set free, isn't always easy. These are the really interesting encounters. I remember an encounter not too long ago with Tamekia here in Indianapolis. Now, Tamekia is a Pike High School graduate. She joined the Navy out of high school. She spent 10 years in the United States Navy. was honorably discharged, and then she returned to civilian life, all ready to start a new career and excited about her bright future. But lingering injuries kept her from going out and securing the sort of profession she had imagined for herself. She had a family to think about, 4 children. Tamika and her husband began reluctantly planning a move to the West Coast. Head south. There's Joe from Paoli. I've gotten to know Joe pretty well over the years, and Joe lost his mother, his only parent, who stayed around during his upbringing, when he was a freshman in college. As Joe will tell you, his life started to get kind of dark. He made some bad decisions. He struggled financially, and he ultimately ended up homeless. He was offered opportunities to stay on friends' couches, but Joe had too much pride for that. And eventually, to find work, Joe had to leave Orange County. As Joe put it, sometimes home is not where the opportunity is. Up the road, there's Jennifer. She lives in Seymour. Now, Jennifer didn't grow up here in Indiana. Jennifer grew up in California, and Jennifer spent the early part of her life going through juvenile hall, and then jail, and then prison. And around age 18, after really coming to Indiana for a fresh start, she found some obstacles she just couldn't overcome for a while. You see, she had a felony in her record that she had incurred to feed her drug habit. So she needed to find someone who saw potential in her, who was willing to take a chance to help her change her life. You know, at first glance, these individuals don't have a whole lot in common with one another. Tamika, Joe, and Jennifer, rural and urban, black and white. But this is where our country keeps tripping over itself. Like all Americans, these Hoosiers want more control over their lives. They want to lead a fulfilling life where they can land a vocation and start a family. They want to live in communities where they feel like they belong. They want their imprisoned lightning unleashed. They want an economy and a civic culture that is built for self-government, where they can flourish. Now, how many others are out there like them, who struggle to find their way, whose lightning is left imprisoned, who aren't able to take the chance of chasing their dreams, or who will never recover from the failure of trying? I'd say the number's rising and preventing our nation from realizing our full potential. Today, increasing numbers of Americans are questioning our commitment to preserving pathways for each of us to dream and do. They're wondering whether America is still built for self-government. This disenchantment is, I believe, not entirely unfounded, and its pace is quickening. On one hand, our quality of life has markedly improved, with incredible transformations to the way we work and live and play. But at the same time, there's a complex and interrelated bundle of forces that have been undermining faith in the very institutions that make our country different and that shape our civic culture. You're familiar with a lot of these changes: globalization, the depopulation of rural communities and movement into and around metro areas, a technological revolution, the emergence of a new strategic rival. Now, I can look at each one of these changes and say, gosh, haven't these benefited each of us in some way? And indeed they have. But they've also created outsized challenges for certain individuals, communities, and regions. Look at Gary, Indiana. In 1990, Lake County had around 27,000 steel mill jobs. It had about 11,000 in 2017. Now, that's almost a 60% drop. Tellingly, today Indiana produces 1/3 more steel than it did in the early 90s, with 1/3 fewer workers. Now, this is great. Efficiency is really good. But as jobs change, some workers, along with families and communities, are left behind. And they just leave. So Gary was once the second largest city in our state, behind Indianapolis. It's now the 11th. So our economy is fundamentally transformed. There's a yawning geographic gap that has opened across America. Between 2005 and 2017, just 5 coastal cities enjoyed more than 90% of the job growth in advanced sectors like tech, computer manufacturing, biotech, and telecommunications. In 2019, only 3 coastal states, California, New York, and Massachusetts, made up more than 75% of all venture-backed investments in the U.S. Now, having a country where such a disproportionate number of these new opportunities opening up in just a few coastal urban areas, places that as a result have become unaffordable to a lot of working families, is ultimately, I believe, not sustainable. In a country in which the circumstances of one's birth shapes the opportunities in one's life, hardly bodes well for self-government. And I think that's increasingly the case. So to put it plainly, despite our many material blessings and the best intentions of our leading citizens, tens of millions of Americans feel left out, left behind, underappreciated, underutilized, and at the mercy of forces beyond their control. In fact, there's a palpable sense that our system, in ways big and small, is rigged. Many Americans are disengaging from public life altogether. Others are losing empathy for their fellow citizens. And this predates COVID. Witnessed dwindling church and synagogue attendance, declining participation in Rotary, Elks, and other civic groups, bowling alone, and decreasing membership in private sector unions. The shared spaces, cafes, bars, parks, community centers, where Americans from different stations have always mixed as equals, have emptied out, or they've grown exclusive. Now, this isn't anyone's fault. We just punctuate that. But it does create an opportunity for leadership. Our national politics. Let's take a look at that. The political parties have seemingly given up on trying to appeal to the same constituency on a variety of different issues. What we're left with is a zero-sum politics in which each side seeks to decimate the other side. This is tribal politics. The great attraction to tribal politics is that it requires very little thought to participate. All you have to know is which side you're on. That's it. And the tribalism's been inflamed by deadly epidemics of addiction, loneliness, isolation, which have greatly impacted those in forgotten or overlooked parts of our country. Naturally, many Americans and many Hoosiers are losing patience, wondering if hard work, ingenuity, and good citizenship are still enough to succeed in America. Is America still built for self-government? Is this a land of opportunity for all, or outsized opportunity for the well-bred, well-fed, and well-wed? Now, as a member of the Triple Crown Club, I can say that. So what chance do Americans like Tamikia and Joe and Jennifer stand in such an environment? What stands to reason that naturally, as long as the institutions that make America different fail to reform to meet this moment, Our shared allegiance is at risk. The common good is at risk. And that promise at the heart of the Declaration of Independence is at risk. The lightning of liberty will remain trapped for too many, and we collectively won't realize our full potential. Is it really any surprise that in recent years we've seen populist movements on the left and the right? Fueled not just by the consequences of vast impersonal economic changes, but by the very personal civic chasm which separates Americans who've benefited handsomely from changes from Americans who have not. But no patriot truly benefits from changes that strain the affections of our citizens for one another, and too often turn American against American. Look, I want to acknowledge we've made some real progress in recent years. Prior to the pandemic, employment reached its highest level on record. That's magnificent. Just if you look at the institution of government in recent years, from criminal justice reform to the creation of opportunity zones to striking down the hidden tax burden of overzealous regulations, there's been some real accomplishments. We've advanced several measures to bridge our national divide and more perfectly unify our people. But let's face it, these are only first steps. More needs to be done. In the days and years ahead, we, all of us, have to devote less energy towards channeling the anger of proud citizens who feel shut out. We need to spend less time giving voice to resentments, as legitimate as they may be. Far better to focus on better understanding the source of people's disempowerment, the true nature of the challenges they're facing. Then, rather than offering vague promises, we can put forward real solutions across various institutions, government among them, that bring our principles in line with our problem solving. In short, we need to reconcile our heads with our hearts. It's, after all, in these communities among the overlooked and utilized men and women, where self-government is in most need of reinforcement, where lightning is being most imprisoned. Now, developing this deeper understanding is going to require those of us who believe in the primacy of market forces and smart, limited government to think in new ways. I really want to underscore this. In recent decades, our prescription for what ails America has reliably been captured by a slogan or a battle cry: more growth, less government. There's no problem we can't grow or cut our way out of. Now, it's true, growth solves many, many problems. Less government is often the answer. This battle cry still inspires life-improving change. Nevertheless, no matter how often we repeat the mantra, we can't deny that economic growth is predicated on disruption. So economic expansion alone won't solve the social, emotional, and civic disruption that people are feeling now. Disruptions will have to be managed, avenues for adaptation and meaningful participation created. Businesses, churches, philanthropies, and other institutions will all need to pull their weight. Governments too, including the government in Washington. And it will take citizen leaders dedicated to ensuring that our economic and civic life are producing citizens that are built for self-government. Over the last decade, I've traveled across this great state, every corner of it. Small towns, big cities. The Hoosiers I've come to know have helped me form a framework for what we can do as government officials, individuals, nonprofit leaders, and other institutions to release the imprisoned lightning across the land and to supercharge America. A framework to help bring equal opportunity to all, ensure every American can access quality education from pre-K to post-secondary to upskilling and reskilling throughout their lives. One that will equip workers with what they need to flourish in the 21st century economy. One that will pull out every stop to assist middle-income workers with the transition to high-income and high-skill employment, and give them the freedom to leave a job by cracking down on abusive employment agreements. One that will reform anti-poverty programs so that the dignity of work always pays more than joblessness, and with an eye towards addressing the modern markers of disadvantage. Things like residential segregation, inadequate grade schools, and lack of access to childcare for would-be working parents. The social determinants that disproportionately affect health and life outcomes. Geopolitically, we should continue to confront our leading strategic rival, Communist China. We have to out-innovate and out-compete the Chinese Communist Party just as we did the Soviet Communist Party. Let's use this moment in history to become a better version of ourselves. With my Endless Frontier Act, we can set the table to make the 21st century the second American century. We should also broaden economic, diplomatic, and military relations with all nations who will prevent China from overturning key elements of the U.S.-led rules-based international order and establishing an illiberal sphere of influence around the world. Now, collectively, these and other proposals can form a national agenda, one that has broad appeal and is not intended to provide ammunition in an ongoing tribal cultural war, but instead to serve every American, mend the splintering nation, and unleash our imprisoned lightning. This is our charge as custodians of the common good. Let's shout less and listen more to all voices, even those we disagree with, and work, when possible, with those whose beliefs differ from our own. Let's just place more faith in one another, not one man or woman. Let's not forget that it's our responsibility to make America whole again. It comes down to us. We can't outsource that to politicians or presidents. It's not going to happen if we do. Now, I've jotted down, as promised, a list of actions we can help us do, accomplish this mission. It brings me to that list of M's, and no, joining the Marines is not one of them. We can mentor. Advice and guidance are among the greatest gifts we can give our fellow Americans, and among the most in demand. We can mix with our neighbors. It's a low-risk, high-reward proposition to engage with and learn from those around us, and we can help recreate those community living rooms. We can let media inform us rather than agitate us and enrage us. Now, it's not easy, but a broader array of information will help us better understand one another. We can mend. We all have the means at our disposal to fill little gaps in our civic society, close to home, with simple acts of service to others. And lastly, we can mobilize. No, not in furtherance of a political cause, although there's time for that, but to make an effort to see each other as friends and countrymen and to enrich the lives of others and provide greater meaning to our own. So this is how we should spend the little time that we're blessed with here on earth, unleashing our own lightning and helping others do the same. Let's never doubt the good that can come from it. Now, I thought I'd close here by telling you how things turned out for those three Hoosiers. As it turns out, Tamika and her family didn't leave Indiana. You see, before the boxes were packed, she learned of an opportunity at the Kenzie Academy here in Indianapolis, a coding school. Both its financing, which uses income share agreements, and its curriculum, which is both online and in person, perfectly suited her family's needs. She received help from her instructors. And Tamikia graduated from Kenzie in 2019, and today she's a software developer. She and her husband are building a house here in town. Up the road where Joe grew up in Paoli, Grand Resorts, victims of another century's economic and cultural changes, sat crumbling for decades. But as you know, in the 90s, private investment resurrected these wonders, not just as acts of preservation, but regeneration. Now the hotels are beautifully restored and modernized and welcoming new vacationers in and providing employment to residents like Joe, who now lives in Orange County, and he's raising a family nearby. And Jennifer, I'm so proud of Jennifer. Jennifer still lives in Seymour. She found people willing to take a chance on her potential. Saw her a couple of months ago. She's sober. She has been for 6 years. She's married, and she's now working as a recovery coach, ministering to women in the Jackson County Jail. The joy I experience, probably many of you experience hearing these stories, can't be captured just by GDP or employment statistics. It's a reminder, I hope, to all of us that each of us should invest in our fellow citizens, our talents, our experiences, our love, our light, our energies, our future. Our future is in people who are underappreciated, underutilized, overlooked. If you make such an investment, I guarantee it will handsomely enrich your own lives and help us unite our nation. Like the mighty woman in New York Harbor, the torch is now in our hands. God bless. Thank you.
Senator, thank you. Those words were incredible, and we appreciate the call to action and giving us something to do starting today. So thank you for that.
Sure. I almost lost it with Jennifer, but you know, it's powerful. It really is. In the end, this is all about people, trying to help one another, whatever our capacity in life, and so it's my privilege to serve in the capacity I do. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, sure. In one of your early speeches, you spoke about this idea of a country where we're fighting not with each other, but for each other. Today, we all see in the news, all we see is politicians fighting with each other. Is the relationship between members of the two parties better behind closed doors than it is in the press?
Always. So, look, one of the things I really enjoy about my job are the spirited arguments, the intelligent arguments, exchange of facts and perspectives and so forth. And what you tend to see on television or hear on the radio or see on social media these days is the ugliness. We have a negativity bias, unfortunately, as individuals, right? And that is what various media outlets have discovered leads to higher ratings. So we're rewarding all of the wrong incentives these days by giving television coverage to those who have fights in public or those who say provocative things sort of endlessly. But really, there's a lot of respectful disagreement. There's a lot of common ground found off of the cameras, which is not particularly exciting, but that's, frankly, it's more common than the other thing. Now, part of our job is to make those spirited arguments when we really have deep convictions about things too, but there's a way to do it in professional ways. So I think it's going to be fashionable again to actually get things done, and that's sort of been a faith I've had in recent years, and it hasn't entirely come to fruition, but I do think that there's going to be just a pent-up demand to actually get some things done, and perhaps the media incentives will change too. But yeah, so each of us has kind of a responsibility, irrespective of the incentives, to go out there and try and muddle through this complicated political atmosphere. Yeah.
Gives us hope for that national agenda.
Yeah, yeah.
Supply chain continues to be a mess. I work in logistics, so I have navigated and worked through every day some of these problems. Port congestion, we can't find chassis, we can't find labor, factories are shutting down erratically around the world. What is Congress working on to make it easier for U.S. businesses to do business domestically and internationally?
Well, some of us have pushed for a number of years now to extend the hours of service when our trucks can operate, especially in emergency situations. I characterize this as a supply chain emergency. So does it make sense in sort of a risk-reward sense to allow truckers to spend an additional hour on the road in an atmosphere like this? I would argue it does, right? Does it make sense to maybe allow trucks to load up with additional items, to carry around larger loads? I would argue it does. Does it make sense to ask our longshoremen at the ports to operate longer hours in this atmosphere? I would say it does. So many ports around the world operate 24/7. Does it make sense to allow the 18 to 21-year-old drivers who are allowed to drive a truck from Clarksville, Indiana, up to Gary and back, but not from Clarksville over to Louisville or not from Gary over to Illinois, to operate interstate? I would argue that it does, which is why I put forward legislation to that effect. So these are things that we should do in short order, and I actually think they collectively would make a meaningful difference. A number of these measures could be taken administratively by the administration, but they've chosen not to.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that you've been involved in. All those things are significant. And how do we think about the Endless Frontier Act under that category of helping U.S. business and Indiana businesses?
Sure. For the uninitiated, the Endless Frontier Act is a collaborative effort that we got 70 votes out of the United States Senate, so Republicans and Democrats. And it calls for significantly increasing our federal investment in areas of applied research, in sort of frontier technologies, areas like battery storage and artificial intelligence, quantum computing, robotics, autonomous vehicles. These are all areas where the Chinese Communist Party, in their own way, are making significant investments. We don't want to replicate their model, but we do want to be the world leader in pre-market investments in these areas. That is, making those strategic bets that we made to create an aerospace sector following World War II, for example. So we call for significant increases in investment in those areas I mentioned and some others, all of which, by the way, have national security implications. And the research will occur at our research universities here in Indiana and around the country, in addition to our Department of Energy labs. We are at once trying to out-innovate and out-compete the Chinese Communist Party, but also preparing the heartland to lead in some of these technology areas and to allow our people to, utilize their full potential and land 21st century tech jobs, and then attract venture capital into the heartland with these federal investments to address many of the macroeconomic dynamics that I just spoke to in my remarks. This legislation, I believe, will pass, if not before year's end, then early next year. And under the legislation, there is a feature that allows states and regions to apply to be tech hubs, federally designated tech hubs. The state of Indiana, on account of our multi-decade leadership across a number of different industry sectors, whether it's life sciences or advanced manufacturing or battery storage or hypersonics, stands a very, very good chance to land one of those tech hubs. It could be transformative to Hoosiers and the sort of thing that will attract more people into this state and retain more of our talent for generations.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Great. Regarding, one thing I didn't say is your white cards, I wanted to remind you, we've got about 10 minutes. Anything you have you want me to ask, write it down. But regarding energy independence, currently we're experiencing the repercussions of not being energy independent, with OPEC choosing not to expand production and increases in gasoline. What initiatives is Congress taking to make the U.S. more energy independent?
Well, we were energy independent a couple of years ago. We were the largest producer of natural gas and oil in the world. And some policy decisions have been made to curtail that on account of carbon concerns. And I take those concerns seriously. I'd say we need to be very careful, though, how we transition to a cleaner energy future. This is, of course, very important to the heartland, where we, for years, have relied on affordable electric power and affordable power more generally to run our economy. But it's important that we don't unwisely require the adoption of technologies that really aren't market ready or can't provide the amount of power that we require. Look what's happening in Europe right now. There are shortages of energy because they've overshot their efforts to address climate change. Moreover, the transition from coal to natural gas led to a bigger decrease in the United States of America's carbon emissions than the carbon emissions of any other country in the world. So if we're smart, we can reduce our carbon emissions while very deliberately moving to green energy technologies. But I see an opportunity here, which is why in the Endless Frontier Act, we included a provision that would increase federal research, again, pre-market research, it's not being funded by venture capitalists, in certain areas of green energy technology. And then we have created provisions to work with other Western countries in development of these technologies. So if we pool our talent and our treasure with partners and allies to develop next-gen geothermal or nuclear, we're much more apt to get breakthroughs more quickly. And our State Department estimates for every US dollar that we invest, we can crowd in 5 US dollar equivalents from our partners and allies. So I think that's a smart approach. It may not be the only approach, but it's an approach that would allow us to continue to run our economy, would not undermine our national security, and it would maintain our level of competitiveness as we head deeper into the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like it's getting some traction?
I absolutely feel like that legislation is not only getting traction, but like it's, if we don't pass that legislation, part of the legislation, we've added on a CHIPS component. So Anything with an on-off switch these days requires microprocessors, computer chips. And as we know, back to the supply chain, this is probably the most serious feedstock to our modern economy that people aren't able to get access to right now. And so we need to incentivize fabs to be built here in the United States as the South Koreans and Europeans are trying to compete for location of those fabs. Because right now we're 100% dependent on other countries for high-end chips. Taiwan is our largest supplier of the sophisticated chips, and it could conceivably be taken over, occupied by the Chinese Communist Party. And so this legislation would incentivize fabrication production here in the United States. Yeah. Feel free. I've heard them all.
All right, since you said that. This is from a long-term Republican. How long do you think the Republican Party will continue to support the big lie?
I don't. So,
not sure.
I don't know.
What is the big lie? I should know probably, but.
So the big lie is essentially that our current president isn't really our president.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. Wouldn't it be refreshing if you heard that answer more frequently from public health experts or business leaders or government leaders? I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
Open borders. This has been a challenge for a while, for years, without a good solution in sight that at least the common person can see. I know a group of 3,000 immigrants are making their way to the border right now. What are your thoughts around some sort of resolution to the immigration challenge, illegal immigration challenge?
We actually had a really good bill a few years ago. Didn't get a lot of notice. I know it seems odd to a lot of people that it was something that came out of the Trump White House, but it was something I had hoped would have gotten more bipartisan support. It provided a path to legal status, which would have ultimately become a path to citizenship. It moved to a skills-based immigration system as to one where we tend to give special preference to particular regions or countries, and I thought that that was a way to enhance our competitiveness globally, since other countries do this as well. It provided for border security, which, with 1.7 million people having crossed this year so far alone and counting, I think it's pretty darn important. Shouldn't be as polarizing as it is. But I thought we were pretty close. So this falls into the category of we have the polls of our party sort of driving this conversation. And I think if we have divided government, I know this will strike many as self-interested, but I actually think that under divided government, we have an opportunity to maybe come up with a principled compromise that gets passed. I think the president would like to get a win in this area because it's been so difficult for so long, and there's just a pent-up demand to resolve all the uncertainty associated with our various immigration laws. And when you think about a way to create economic opportunity and enhance our national security moving forward, there's really two ways to grow an economy, right? And therefore to become more dynamic and to become a stronger military power. You can ensure that each individual becomes more productive, and you do that through certain types of investments and worker training and capital equipment and some other ways. Or you can get more citizens. And we have not yet, no country's figured out how to really incentivize somebody to have more children. So in the absence of an increase in birth rate in this country, we need more immigrants. And there are many other reasons why legal immigration is a good thing for our country, but I think there's some really sort of hard-headed and sober-minded reasons that we should pursue this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And maybe you addressed this in the M's, but as I shared
It's all covered in the M's.
during your introduction, you spent many years serving our country and have an insider's view. How can we best continue to support the military?
Goodness. I can think of a lot of ways. Thanking people for their service really might even seem cliche to some, but it's really appreciated. One of the reasons people serve is because it makes them feel good to serve. And everyone wants to serve, a cause greater than themselves and to be respected by their fellow citizens. So just acknowledging someone's service is really a big deal. I can tell you from personal experience, especially in light of the many deployments that so many of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines have been through in recent years. I think start there, making that a habit. And then if you feel a heart to, serve in another capacity, get involved in a not-for-profit. I see David Mann up here, and he for years has been involved in HVAF of Indiana, which helps homeless veterans and their families here in Indianapolis. That's fantastic, but why don't we just start with the foundation of expressing gratitude to people who oftentimes have many other options in life. We've got the best educated military in the world. A lot of people don't realize this. So many people join the military. You have a lot of enlisted people these days with PhDs and master's degrees. They don't aspire to start a business. They don't want to occupy a C-suite. They just want a modest income, and they want to be part of something special and meaningful and serving their country. That's remarkable. That's beautiful, and we should all celebrate that.
Yeah. Senator, thank you so much. It's been incredibly valuable to have you here, and we very much appreciate your time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Today's presentation will be available at economicclubofindiana.com. Please join us next month on Tuesday, December 14th for Education Today, a conversation with some of Indiana's leaders in higher education, moderated by Indiana Commissioner on Higher Education, Teresa Lubbers. Be sure and purchase your tickets and join us for an engaging conversation. Information and tickets can be found on economicclubofindiana.com. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.